Forget the sanitized history of U.S. tribes you learned in school. The real story involves uncrackable military codes, women holding political power centuries ago, and settling major disputes with brutal, high-stakes games. We're diving into 49 weird, ingenious, and shocking facts that paint a very different and far more interesting picture of America's first peoples. 1. Forget swabbing your cheek and mailing it to a lab to find out you're 3% Scandinavian. The Blackfeet tribe had a far more profound connection to their roots, literally. They believed the first humans didn't fall from the sky or sail across an ocean. They crawled straight out of the dirt. Their spiritual leaders held ceremonies not just to honor this, but to literally bring people back to that earthly origin. Imagine a ritual so powerful, it was meant to spiritually reset you to factory settings, reuniting you with the planet. It makes our modern obsessions with grounding and mindfulness apps seem a little pathetic, doesn't it? It's a whole different level of being one with nature. 2. Your company's annual team-building retreat, with its awkward trust falls and forced enthusiasm, is an insult to true collaboration. For a real masterclass, look to the Zuni people and their ceremonial ant dance. They correctly identified ants as the ultimate experts in teamwork and resource management, so they decided to learn from the best by mimicking them. Through this dance, they believed they could tap into nature's operational wisdom to secure their community's future. Let's be honest, watching your CEO do an ant dance would be infinitely more effective for morale than another PowerPoint presentation on synergy, though it would probably just end with a lawsuit. 3. While the so-called enlightened societies were still debating whether women should own property or even have opinions, the Seminole tribe was operating on a different level entirely. They established a form of government where women's participation in political decision-making wasn't just allowed, it was integral. Seminole women wielded immense influence, acting as crucial advisors and steering the very direction of their nation. This wasn't some token gesture. It was a political structure built on the radical idea that maybe, just maybe, the other half of the population had some good ideas. A concept some modern institutions are still struggling to grasp. 4. In the early 1800s, a Cherokee man named Sequoyah, who couldn't read or write in any language, decided to do something simple: invent a written language from scratch. The result was the Cherokee syllabary, a system so brilliantly intuitive that within a few short years, it took his people from zero literacy to near universal literacy. No venture capital, no beta testing, no government grants. One man created a system that a whole nation adopted faster than we adopt a new iPhone update. It's a staggering feat of intellectual engineering that makes most modern disruptors look like they're just selling glorified spreadsheets. 5. If you think modern filmmakers who play with timelines are clever, you should know the Cree people were doing it centuries ago around the campfire. They had a fascinating storytelling tradition with a mind-bending twist. Sometimes, they'd tell the whole story backward. Starting with the conclusion and working their way to the beginning wasn't just a gimmick. It was a psychological tool to force listeners to engage their brains, analyze every detail, and truly understand the why behind the events, not just the what. It's the original narrative puzzle box, designed for an audience with an attention span longer than a TikTok video. 6. Forget filing a lawsuit or having a heated argument over the property line. The Choctaw tribe had a far more efficient and, frankly, more entertaining way to settle major disputes: a massive, no-holds-barred game of stickball. This wasn't a friendly pickup game. It could involve hundreds of men in a chaotic, bone-crunching contest where the prize wasn't a trophy, but the resolution to a serious conflict. The losing tribe had to accept the other's terms, period. Imagine settling a border dispute with a Super Bowl where the losing team just has to hand over a few thousand square miles of territory. Now that's high-stakes sports. 7. Long before architects were patting themselves on the back for eco-friendly designs, the Pueblo tribes were building masterpieces of sustainable, defensive architecture. They constructed entire villages into the sheer faces of cliffs. These weren't primitive mud huts. They were sophisticated multi-story dwellings made of stone and adobe, some of which are still standing strong today. This brilliant design offered natural air conditioning in the summer, insulation in the winter, and a nearly impenetrable defense against anyone who thought about invading. The only real downside? Forgetting your wallet on the top floor meant your whole day was ruined. 8. In the scorching deserts of Arizona, where you'd think the only available drink is warm water and despair, the Tohono O'odham tribe were practicing the art of extreme winemaking. They crafted a unique ceremonial wine from the fermented juice of the saguaro cactus fruit. This wasn't just a way to get a buzz in the desert. The sweet, potent beverage was a vital part of their rain-making ceremonies and a crucial source of hydration. Your artisanal craft brewer might brag about his locally sourced hops, but did he have to risk his life wrestling a 40-foot cactus for his ingredients? I didn't think so. 9. Forget stuffy classrooms and professors with tenure. For the Tlingit people of the Pacific Northwest, the ultimate survival instructor was a mythical figure known as the Land Otter Man. According to their traditions, this being was originally an otter who transformed into a human to bestow upon them the essential knowledge of how to hunt, fish, and survive in one of the planet's most unforgiving climates. These weren't just charming bedtime stories. This was their core curriculum, passed down through generations. Imagine your survival guide not being some guy with a TV show, but a shape-shifting aquatic mammal. It certainly beats a PowerPoint presentation on wilderness safety. 10. For most of us, a dream is just our brain's nightly cleanup crew, sorting through the day's garbage, resulting in bizarre scenarios where you're late for an exam you haven't studied for. For the Algonquin tribe, however, it was something else entirely. They believed dreams were a direct portal to the spiritual world, a live-feed communication channel where their ancestors could provide guidance and warnings. Every dream was treated as a sacred message, a piece of actionable intelligence for everyday life. It's a fascinating concept. Forget making a pro-con list. You just go to sleep and wait for your great-great-grandfather to tell you whether to buy that new canoe. 11. In the worldview of some tribes, such as the Cree, the forest wasn't just a collection of animals to be hunted. It was a place with its own invisible societies. They believed that animals had their own villages in the spiritual realm, and a hunter's success depended on maintaining a respectful relationship with these spirit communities. To take an animal, a hunter essentially had to receive permission from the animal's spirit kin. This reframes the entire act of hunting from one of brute force to one of delicate spiritual diplomacy. It implies a level of respect for nature that makes our modern harvesting of resources seem positively barbaric. 12. We've all agonized over crafting the perfect resume, trying to squeeze our accomplishments onto a single page with just the right buzzwords. The Crow tribe had a system that was infinitely cooler and way more honest. For them, a warrior's war paint wasn't just for intimidation. Each line and symbol painted on his face and body was a public record, a visual story of his achievements. Battles won, horses captured, enemies touched. It was a living, breathing LinkedIn profile that you wore into combat. There was no faking it, and no room for vague claims like demonstrated leadership skills. You either had the mark or you didn't. 13. Some displays of faith are quiet and internal. The Lakota Sioux Sun Dance is not one of them. This is one of the most intense and profound religious ceremonies in North America. The ritual involves days of fasting and continuous dancing, culminating in an incredible act of physical endurance and sacrifice. Participants would pierce the skin of their chest or back and attach themselves to a central sacred pole with leather thongs, dancing until the flesh tore free. This wasn't symbolic. It was a literal physical offering, a demonstration of devotion that went far beyond mere words, meant to secure the well-being of the entire tribe. It's a testament to a level of spiritual conviction that is almost impossible for the modern world to comprehend. 14. Picture this. You're part of a tribe on the northwest coast, and you want to trade your surplus of dried salmon with the tribe a few valleys over, who have excellent obsidian for toolmaking. The problem? You speak completely different languages. Instead of just pointing and grunting, tribes like the Hidatsa did something brilliant. They developed trade jargons. These were simplified, hybrid languages, a linguistic toolkit designed for one purpose: to get business done. It was the ultimate practical solution, a common ground that allowed for complex negotiations and peaceful relations between dozens of different cultures. It was probably more efficient than most corporate email chains are today. 15. You've probably seen a dream catcher hanging from a rearview mirror, but its origin with the Ojibwa tribe is far more fascinating than just being a decorative air freshener. It wasn't just a pretty web of twigs and feathers, it was a piece of ancient technology, a spiritual filter designed to protect sleeping children. The belief was that the night air was filled with dreams, both good and bad. The web of the dream catcher would catch the bad dreams and hold them until the morning sun destroyed them, while the good dreams would slip through the center and slide down the feathers to the child. It was essentially a psychic firewall for a child's mind. 16. Where do we go when we die? While many religions look up to the heavens, the Hopi tribe looked down. They held the profound belief that they originally emerged from a world deep beneath the Earth's surface, and that after their time in this life was over, they would return there. This made their existence on the surface a kind of journey, an extended visit before going back home. This worldview fostered an incredible, built-in respect for the planet. After all, you treat the world differently when you believe it's both your womb and your eventual tomb, not just a temporary address you can trash before you leave. 17. In our modern economy, value is an abstract concept backed by, well, confidence mostly, but for the Navajo, value was something you could literally wrap yourself in. They were among the first people to use their intricately hand-woven rugs as a form of currency. These weren't just floor coverings. The craftsmanship was so exceptional and labor-intensive that a single rug could be traded for livestock, goods, or services. Imagine walking into a trading post and paying for your supplies not with flimsy paper or a plastic card, but with a masterpiece of textile art. It gives a whole new meaning to the term liquid assets, especially if you spill something on it. 18. In a world obsessed with fleeting status symbols, designer bags you carry for a season, luxury cars you lease for 3 years, the Choctaw had a slightly more permanent approach. They practiced infant head flattening, a process that physically marked an individual with high social status for life. This wasn't something you could sell on Craigslist when it went out of style or trade in for a newer model. It was an irreversible, lifelong commitment to your place in the social hierarchy. It kind of makes a Rolex look like a temporary tattoo, doesn't it? 19. If you think today's designer dog breeds are impressive, you haven't heard about the Nez Perce. They weren't just people who had horses. They were master geneticists and equine artists. They selectively bred their herds to create horses with such unique physical traits and spectacular color patterns, the ancestors of the modern Appaloosa, that they became the ultimate status symbol across the plains. Other tribes and even European settlers clamored to acquire a Nez Perce horse. They weren't just breeding animals, they were creating living, breathing works of art that were also high-performance vehicles. It was the 18th century equivalent of rolling up in a custom-painted Ferrari. 20. When most victors celebrate, they might take a souvenir or just gloat. The Yakima tribe had a custom that was far more psychologically profound. After a battle, a warrior would adopt the weapon of a defeated enemy. This wasn't about adding a new tool to their arsenal. It was a symbolic act of absorbing the power, skill, and spirit of the fallen foe. The weapon became a trophy infused with the energy of that victory, a constant reminder of their own strength. It's one thing to win a fight, it's another thing entirely to walk away carrying your opponent's very essence. That's a level of intimidation that no trash talking can ever achieve. 21. Many of us have a lucky charm, a rabbit's foot, a special coin that we hope brings us good fortune. The Siksika people of the Blackfoot Confederacy took this concept to a whole other dimension with their medicine bundles. These weren't just collections of sacred objects. They were considered living, conscious entities with immense spiritual power. Passed down through generations, these bundles were cared for, fed with prayers and ceremonies, and consulted for guidance. They were less like a talisman and more like a spiritual family member who held the health, safety, and destiny of the entire lineage in their care. It's a heavy responsibility for what looks like a bag of old trinkets. 22. Our modern world is filled with noise that means absolutely nothing. Endless notifications, targeted ads, the meaningless chatter of social media. For the Cheyenne people, the noise of the natural world was the entire point. The sound of wind rustling through willows wasn't just weather. It was a direct communication from the spirit world offering guidance and wisdom. Imagine living in a state of constant, ambient spiritual broadcast, where the universe was always whispering secrets. Meanwhile, we're drowning in junk data while they were tuned into a frequency we can no longer even find. 23. We check our phones for the weather forecast, blindly trusting an algorithm to tell us if we need an umbrella. The Cahuilla people of Southern California had a slightly more sophisticated system. They just looked up. They were masters of the Sky Watch, an intricate practice of tracking the movements of the stars and constellations to predict seasonal changes with incredible accuracy. This wasn't casual stargazing. It was a complex astronomical science that allowed them to manage agriculture and prepare for the future. They didn't need a weather app. They had a celestial calendar that was far more reliable and didn't try to sell them premium subscriptions. 24. Before there were graphic novels or historical documentaries, there were the Kiowa story hides. The Kiowa people were renowned for their unique storytelling tradition, where they would paint elaborate visual chronicles of their history, mythology, and significant events onto cured animal hides. These weren't just decorative wall hangings. They were complex narratives, visual aids used by storytellers to recount epic sagas to the next generation, ensuring their culture was passed down in vivid detail. It was a library, an art gallery, and a history lesson all rolled into one, preserved on a medium far more permanent than a hard drive that's one power surge away from oblivion. 25. We have entire television channels dedicated to meteorologists using Doppler radar and complex computer models, and they still get the forecast wrong half the time. Meanwhile, the Hopi people had a more direct approach: the rain dance. And here's the part that drives scientists and skeptics absolutely crazy. There are numerous documented instances where these intricate, days-long rituals have been followed by sudden, localized downpours. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe having a spiritual connection to the land that goes back thousands of years gives you a slightly better track record than the guy on the evening news pointing at a green screen. 26. Modern childhood is often a whirlwind of tapping on screens and collecting digital junk. The Mohican tribe, however, had games with a bit more substance. They practiced a ritual called the Game of the Little People, where children would chase and attempt to catch tiny, specially carved wooden figures. This wasn't just a way to burn off energy. Catching one of these figures was believed to bring good luck, and the game itself taught vital skills like patience, dexterity, and a respect for small, important details. It was a game designed to build a better person, not just to achieve the next level. 27. In the rulebook of conventional warfare, you typically want your attacks to be organized and predictable. The Paiute tribe apparently never got that memo. During battles, they employed a terrifyingly chaotic technique, launching fireballs at their enemies. They would light bundles of brush and hurl them high into the air, creating glowing, fiery projectiles that rained down on their foes from unexpected angles. The goal wasn't just to burn, but to create absolute panic and confusion. It was low-tech psychological warfare at its finest, a scene straight out of a fantasy epic that proved you don't need fancy artillery to make your enemy think the sky is falling. 28. When you think of ancient maritime cultures, you probably think of Vikings or Polynesians. But right on the coast of California, the Chumash people were developing some of the most advanced naval technology in the Americas. They built incredible plank canoes known as tommels, which were so sturdy and seaworthy they were essentially the offshore vessels of their time. These weren't just hollowed-out logs. They were sophisticated craft that allowed the Chumash to travel vast distances, dominate coastal trade routes, and fish in the deep ocean. They were the undisputed masters of their coastline, all without a single engine or GPS. 29. Most of us think of fishing as a game of patience and luck, sitting by a lake with a pole and hoping for a nibble. The Kalispel tribe of the Pacific Northwest looked at that and thought, there has to be a better way. Their solution was an incredibly intricate system of fish traps, or weirs. These were complex underwater fences and mazes built in rivers, designed to funnel migrating salmon into a netted area from which they couldn't escape. The fish literally caught themselves. It was a brilliant feat of passive engineering that provided a sustainable, reliable food source without anyone having to spend all day getting sunburned. 30. To most of us, a rock is just a rock. You might skip it across a pond or use it to hold a door open. For the Ute tribe, however, certain stones were something else entirely. They had spirit stones, rocks believed to possess tangible magical properties. These weren't just lucky charms. They were considered active conduits to the spiritual world, carried by warriors for supernatural protection and strength in battle. It's a fascinating idea that the ground beneath our feet could be littered with dormant portals and power sources, and we're all just completely oblivious, looking for our car keys. 31. In times of trouble, people pray to saints, gods, or ancestors for protection. The Kiowa tribe had a slightly more badass option on their spiritual speed dial, a supernatural entity called the Red Dog. According to their legends, this massive, powerful spirit dog would physically manifest on the battlefield to aid Kiowa warriors. He wasn't just a symbol of courage. He was a divine special ops agent who showed up to ensure victory. Forget guardian angels with harps. Imagine being in a fight and having a spectral hound of hell show up as your backup. That's a serious tactical advantage. 32. Trying to carry water in a desert environment without a proper container is a recipe for a very short, very bad day. Long before the invention of plastic or metal canteens, the Apache tribe had mastered this challenge with pure ingenuity. They were renowned for their skill in crafting woven bottles from plant fibers and coating them with pine pitch. These baskets were woven so tightly and sealed so perfectly that they were completely waterproof, allowing them to carry precious water across the arid landscape. It's an incredible example of creating a life-saving technology from the seemingly useless, dry materials of the environment itself. 33. Before fiber optics and 5G networks, communication across vast, empty distances was a serious challenge. For the tribes of the Great Plains like the Arapaho and Cheyenne, the solution was ingenious and surprisingly complex. They developed sophisticated signaling systems using smoke during the day, fires at night, and even reflected sunlight off shiny objects. This wasn't just big smoke means trouble. It was a coded language of puffs, patterns, and placements that could transmit specific messages, warnings of danger, announcements of a successful hunt, or calls for a meeting. It was the original high-speed data network, and it was unhackable, untraceable, and didn't come with a monthly bill. 34. For most of us, long-distance running is about personal bests, fancy sneakers, and maybe posting a sweaty selfie afterward. For the Kickapoo tribe, it was an entirely different pursuit. They held sacred running contests where participants would run grueling distances not for a medal, but as a form of active prayer or to receive blessings from the spirits. The physical exhaustion and endurance weren't the byproduct, they were the point. It was a deeply spiritual practice, a way of communicating with the divine through sheer physical exertion. It makes you wonder what people are really praying for when they're hitting mile 20 of the Boston Marathon. 35. Every culture has rituals for honoring the dead, but the Osage tribe had a custom that was both beautiful and deeply symbolic. They would bury their deceased in a seated position, with their face oriented to the east. This wasn't an arbitrary choice. The belief was that by facing the dawn, the spirit of the deceased could properly greet the rising sun and begin its journey into the next life. It wasn't just a burial, it was an orientation, a final, respectful act of setting someone on the right path. It's a launch sequence for the soul, and it's a far more poetic send-off than most of us will ever get. 36. Today, we signal our belonging to a group by clicking a like button, wearing a sports jersey, or adding a slogan to our online profile. The Yuki tribe had a slightly higher barrier to entry. They practiced ritual mutilation, where permanent scars or removed teeth served as an undeniable physical certificate of membership. This wasn't about looking tough. It was about earning your place through a shared trial of pain and endurance. The pain was the price of admission. Makes you wonder what our modern tribes would look like if membership required something more than just a strong opinion. 37. Our society has turned disposable into a virtue, creating mountains of waste from things we use once. The Sioux, however, operated on a philosophy of absolute respect for their primary resource, the buffalo. They believed the buffalo was a sacred gift, and to waste any part of it was a profound spiritual offense. Every single piece of the animal was used: the meat for food, the hide for shelter and clothing, the bones for tools, the sinew for thread, even the hooves for glue. The buffalo was their supermarket, their hardware store, and their church, all rolled into one magnificent creature. 38. Our culture screams that success is measured by what you accumulate. Bigger houses, faster cars, more stuff. The Sioux operated on a principle that was the complete opposite. True status and respect in their society came not from what you owned, but from what you could afford to give away. During ceremonies known as giveaways, influential families would distribute their possessions, horses, blankets, goods, to others in the tribe. This wasn't charity. It was a demonstration of power through generosity, a way to build social bonds and prove your wealth by showing how little you needed to keep it. It's a system where your influence grows the more you empty your own house. 39. How do we remember the dead? Faded photographs, old videos, maybe a social media page left frozen in time. The Mojave people had a far more tangible and arguably more haunting method for keeping the memory of their loved ones alive. They practiced a custom of creating life masks, where they would carefully mold a mask directly from the face of a deceased relative. These masks weren't seen as morbid. They were sacred objects, displayed to honor the spirit and maintain a physical connection to the person who was gone. It's an act of remembrance that's intensely personal, transforming grief into a physical artifact. 40. Most of us see the world in standard definition. Snow is just snow, maybe wet snow or fluffy snow. The Inuit, however, perceived their environment in ultra-high-definition 8K. Their language has over 50 distinct words for snow, because to them, it wasn't one thing. It was 50 different things. There was snow for building, snow for travel, dangerous snow that could kill you, and snow that meant fresh water was near. This wasn't a linguistic hobby, it was a survival lexicon. They weren't just living in a different climate. They were experiencing a different physical reality, with a level of detail we literally cannot perceive. 41. How do you find your purpose in life? Today, we have career counselors, self-help books, and endless online quizzes. The Crow tribe had a method that was slightly more intense. It was called the Vision Quest. A young man would go out into the wilderness alone, with no food or water, for several days. The goal was to endure the physical hardship until the barriers between the physical and spiritual worlds broke down, allowing him to receive a vision. This wasn't a survival test. It was a spiritual job interview with the universe, where you didn't leave until you got a clear direction for your entire life. It makes choosing a college major seem a lot less stressful. 42. Almost every human culture on Earth counts using a base 10 system, likely because we have 10 fingers. It seems like the most obvious way to do math. But the Yuki tribe of California were wired differently. They used a base 8 or octal system. Why? Because they counted using the spaces between their fingers, not the fingers themselves. This is a level of abstract thinking that's both brilliant and slightly mind-bending. It's a reminder that even something as fundamental as counting isn't a universal law, and that there are entirely different ways of perceiving the world, right at our fingertips. Or in their case, between them. 43. Modern parents face a mountain of non-biodegradable diapers, a monument to convenience that will outlive us all. The Inuit people, living in one of the most resource-scarce environments on Earth, had a solution that was infinitely smarter. For their babies, they used dried moss. It was highly absorbent, naturally antimicrobial, and completely biodegradable. It was the perfect diaper provided by nature, used, and then returned to nature. It's a perfect example of sustainable parenting that makes our modern eco-friendly options look like a clumsy, overpriced imitation of a system they perfected centuries ago. 44. We commemorate big life events with things. A watch for graduation, a ring for marriage. The Cheyenne tribe had a tradition that was far more personal and artistic. They would mark significant moments with elaborate quill work. Using dyed porcupine quills, they would sew intricate, symbolic designs into clothing, blankets, and moccasins. Each pattern told a story, turning everyday items into a living record of a person's life and achievements. It was wearable history, a way of stitching your personal legacy into the very fabric of your existence, which is a lot more meaningful than a gold-plated plaque. 45. You've seen them in movies, but the reality of the Cheyenne war bonnet is far more profound than just being an impressive piece of headwear. These were not fashion accessories. A warrior couldn't just decide to wear one. Each single eagle feather in that bonnet had to be earned through a specific, verified act of bravery in battle. The entire headdress was a visual resume of courage, a public declaration of a man's service and valor. To wear one was to carry the weight and honor of your entire history on your head. It wasn't about looking intimidating. It was about proving you had the right to. 46. Getting a glimpse of the future is big business today, from stock market analysts to tarot card readers. The Hopi tribe, however, integrates prophecy directly into their most sacred ceremonies with their kachina dancers. During these rituals, masked members of the tribe embody the spirits, or kachinas. They don't just dance, they are believed to become a channel for the spirits themselves, bringing blessings, ensuring rain, and sometimes delivering prophecies about the future. It's not a sideshow, it's a central part of their spiritual governance. Forget a crystal ball. They have a direct hotline to the divine, with a much better dance routine. 47. History rightly celebrates the Navajo code talkers, but they weren't the only ones whose language became an unbreakable weapon. During World War II, the U.S. military also turned to members of the Choctaw tribe. Their language was so complex and so radically different from European or Asian languages that it was utterly indecipherable to enemy codebreakers. The Choctaw speakers could transmit sensitive military messages over the radio in plain sight, and to the Germans, it was just meaningless noise. It's an incredible irony that a language the U.S. government once tried to eradicate ended up being a critical tool for saving it. 48. When modern society faces a water shortage, our solution is brute force. Build a massive dam, drill a deeper well, create a billion plastic bottles. The Tohono O'odham tribe practiced a quieter, more elegant form of genius. They were masters of micro-engineering their arid world for survival. By creating specialized clay pots to minimize evaporation and expertly shaping the land to channel every precious drop of rain into natural reservoirs, they worked with the desert, not against it. It proves that the most brilliant solutions aren't always the biggest or loudest, but the ones born from a deep, respectful intelligence that we seem to have forgotten. 49. For many, a cape is something out of a superhero movie or a royal coronation. For the Yurok tribe of Northern California, it was a symbol of status, spirituality, and incredible skill. They crafted magnificent cedar bark capes worn during important ceremonies. These weren't just simple garments. Creating one was a painstaking process of harvesting, preparing, and meticulously weaving the cedar bark, a task that could take weeks. The finished cape was a testament to the weaver's patience and artistry, a beautiful and functional piece of wearable sculpture that connected the wearer to the sacred power of the redwood forest. So it seems the people we were taught to see as primitive were busy inventing spiritual firewalls, sustainable economics, and having direct lines to the cosmos. It really makes you wonder. Now, I want you to go down to the comments and tell me which one of these ancient practices we desperately need to bring back to fix our own broken society. Don't be shy. The more controversial, the better. While you're there, hitting the like and subscribe buttons is the modern equivalent of a generous giveaway. Just saying.